This presentation of ThinkTech Hawaii is made possible by Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates. Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve. Galen Ho, the Senior Executive at BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. The High Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Castle and Cook Hawaii, for the time-honored legacy that stands more than 160 years and revolves around this nation's investment in Hawaii, creating communities and providing for the needs of our state. Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a component of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company powering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data needed to better inform property and investment decisions.
Hello, welcome to ThinkTech TV. My name is Charlie Willson. I have two guests with me today to discuss the Mauka Area Plan and the redevelopment of Kakaako. I have City Council member Carol Fukunaga. Most of you are probably quite familiar. She's been around for a while and very knowledgeable about what's going on both in the county and at the state level here. I have Representative Della Au Belatti, who's a little bit newer, but is also very up to speed on these issues, as we all saw for people who watched the last town meeting. I'm going to start by asking each of you if you could give me just a little bit of a trajectory, how you got here through the process, your past positions and who you're representing right now, so that the viewers are aware.
Actually, I represent a district that is really a lot larger than Kakaako. Currently, I serve as the council member for District 6, which includes a little bit of Makiki Punch Bowl, Tantalus, Ala Moana, and that section of Kakaako from Ward Avenue all the way down to the waterfront and downtown Chinatown, and then it extends across the valley sections, Nu'uanu, Alewa, Kalihi Valley, Moanalua, Aiea, and then Halapa Valley. How I really kind of got involved with a lot of Kakaako issues was partially because of our small businesses on Queen Street, who first started working very closely with the legislature about 10 years ago. So as a result of that, I've been working on Kakaako development issues for about the last 10 years, and now that I represent a portion of the area, it's all coming together.
I represent the Makiki Tantalus area in the State House. I'm in my 8th year, entering my 8th year as a representative. I'm very interested in what's happening in Kakaako because it's a neighboring district to the Makiki Tantalus area. So I represent some of the older communities of urban Honolulu. I am also very interested in Kakaako because it's where I think all of urban Honolulu lives, works, and plays. It certainly is a vibrant area that I love to go and visit and partake in all the commercial activities. Finally, the third reason why I'm very interested is because my daughter attends Queen Kaahumanu School, which is one of the schools that will be impacted by Kakaako development. So there's lots of reasons. I think it truly is a place where we all live, work, and play.
Well, thank you. I've also been a Kakaako resident a downtown resident for more than 20 years. So this is kind of my walking area if I go out for an exercise walk. Mm-hmm. So I know the area pretty well myself, and I've been watching this fairly carefully for a while here. Obviously, much of Kakaako is kind of an old industrial area. I mean, we all remember back 30 years ago, there was home improvement type places, construction, lumber yards, there's still auto shops, there's a lot of places that migrated to a lower rent area, and a lot of businesses formed here. It's a little bit dowdy looking nowadays and probably could use a facelift. This is what's proposed is way more than a facelift. Now, we've got two sides to every issue here, and one side is going to say, well, we're talking about growth, we're talking about more prosperity, more jobs, we're talking about not just gussying the place up a little bit, we're talking about a complete redevelopment. Some of the proposals now have 700-foot towers included in them. Several of the others have 400-foot towers. And for those of you at home who are interested, you can download from the Office of Environmental Quality Control and take a look at the environmental assessment, which was completed in 2009, which will give you more details than you would ever want to ask. But that's all available, so you can get most of the information that we'll be talking about today. Now, looking at the pros and cons here, we also have to acknowledge that these changes are very long-term. We will change the face of this area probably forever. And there's a downside here. We have to look at the loss of environmental resources, and we have to look at how our future generation is going to look at this. And obviously you're getting some feedback both from developers and constituents here. So you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So let me just start and ask. Right now we have a state agency, HCDA, which is overseeing this, and normally the county would be making decisions on development. So could you perhaps bring us up to date and tell us exactly how this works?
Well, I think the most intriguing thing, about HCDA is that as a state agency, it has had the power to redevelop for a fairly long time.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last 10 years, much of its redevelopment activities were primarily directed towards infrastructure rebuilding, starting from the area closest
Mm-hmm.
to the water, where the Johnny Burns School of Medicine is currently located, kind of moving all the way up towards the central Kakaako area. And what is particularly significant about the HCDA's role in zoning and planning is that, unlike a lot of the city zoning processes, the HCDA is sort of the developer of infrastructure in some instances. It is also the agency that makes decisions about individual projects. And so up to this point, there's never really been as much of a real public review, of what the agency does. Whereas from a city zoning standpoint, what I've learned very quickly is that, there's a lot of protection built in for individual property owners. If you live in the vicinity of a proposed development, you are automatically notified at the point when an application is filed. People who live within, I believe it's 300 feet of the proposed development receive a written notice, of the action that's being proposed. You can go down to the Department of Planning and Permitting to get a copy of the application. There's a very specific timeline. You have 45 days to review, submit comments, testimonies, participate in a public hearing if they're going to be holding one for major change versus, say, kind of a minor change, a variance of some sort. You also have the City Council, which weighs in on any of the zoning changes that are adopted, say by the department. So there's quite a bit of protection built in for individual property owners and residents that I was, sort of unaware that didn't exist in the same framework for the state zoning and planning kinds of statutes. And so that's really been sort of a revelation to me, especially during this, last 6 months, where a number of residents who called us were really concerned because they didn't have any kind of notification directly. And I think for most people, that's sort of what you think about, whether it's somebody building a bar or a restaurant, next to your condominium building. Most residents who live in condominiums sort of envision being notified as the first step in the development process. And so it's very different, with the current HCDA procedures.
That's the sense I got. The level of public disclosure which is required of major projects maybe has not quite been up to par on this. put it lightly.
What I would add, though, is that no one should be surprised about HCDA's authority, because this authority was granted to them in 1976. So I think what we're seeing right now is the intensification of development that's been brought about because the state has invested so much in infrastructure, and also because we're in a development cycle now where times are good, and so developers are wanting to build, and now HCDA is exercising the authority that it's been granted. But I think what it has revealed in the public outcry is that maybe there are places for improvement in that process.
Certainly, I think that there's a lot to recommend, with some of the city zoning processes, whereby you at least provide notice to the affected residents, within a specific radius, near a project, or you actually have specific timelines, for your review process, where people can go to get information, what the timeline is going to be, so that it kind of gives everyone a sense of, okay, here's what the process is going to be, and here's the appropriate, mechanisms for people to review and comment on what they think may be some of the adverse impacts. Typically, if it's all positive, nobody really gets all that concerned. But if you get concerned about traffic, or maybe capacity, of the sewer and water systems to handle increased development, those are really questions that should be answered thoughtfully before you actually go forward with a lot of development, so that you don't have surprises later on in the process.
Could I just add something? I think what's complicating this question about disclosure and opportunity to comment is that there are so many things happening all at once. There are individual development projects that are going up. There is, we know that there's the 2011 EIS, or the 2011 rules that we're dealing with. We know that there's transit-oriented development that's coming into play, and then that there's going to be another EIS that's going to be released in October 2013. So it's all of this kind of intensification of development and all of these opportunities for public to get involved that's kind of confusing.
Yes, I think on the part of the public, some of the people, their heads are spinning. They're saying, well, hang on, you've got one environmental assessment, now you've got a whole bunch of separate individual projects that are looking to get through, and then you have a set of rules. You have a 1982 plan, 2005 rules, 2011 plan and rules, and now you've got the new transit-oriented development overlay plan, which now sets another set of rules and standards, and these are not always in agreement. Further, the modification of the normal development rules, basically the state under, pursuant to Act 153 Session Laws of Hawaii, 1976, authority was granted by the state legislature to HCDA to supersede county ordinances, which basically means the state is now in control of that which would normally be under county oversight. And so a lot of people are saying, well, hang on a second, exactly where are we, and what am I commenting on, and what is the full plan? So.
Can I say this about the county roles, though, and what I'm understanding as we have these town meetings is that the county can at some point say sewer capacity will be reached, and no, this development does not fit into our sewer plans. But we haven't reached that point yet. And so we haven't seen those kinds of comments coming out of any of the city agencies. I just want to be clear. I mean, the point I'm making is that the county still is very much involved. And I think that's what us legislators want to do, is ensure that the county and the state are really talking to each other, so that we don't have a disaster in Kakaako when it comes to sewer and traffic and all of these other things that are really important to public life.
Well, I think the bigger question, from a city standpoint, is that you don't always look at individual projects in isolation. And I think Councilmember Kobayashi has been very diligent, in bringing up this point, is that you have to look at the whole region, because as you think about sewer capacity, as you start thinking about some of the issues that have arisen, near particular streets, for example, or you think about traffic congestion, it's not one street or just one intersection, that is affected when you have development. It really is the entire region. And so it becomes really important to examine, what the potential impacts are, and how well we're looking at, ensuring that we're not creating bigger congestion or capacity issues than we have currently.
That's an excellent point. We're going to come right back to that right after our break. Give us just a moment. We'll be right back to you with Councilmember Carol Fukunaga and Representative Della Au Belatti.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell. I want to tell you about our program this month. We're doing a lunch and panel program at the Plaza Club with the Hawaii Venture Capital Association and ThinkTech about China. It's Don't Be Afraid to Send Your Kid or CEO to China. Stories of daring do and of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness in the People's Republic. We want to introduce you to some people who have lived in China and show you that life in China is not so bad. It's not all about corruption and environmental degradation and lack of civil or human rights. It's not like that. And we want to have them tell you their day-to-day stories about how they've lived there. So our moderator is Larry Foster. He has taught law in China, and he has been practicing law in China for a firm in Shanghai. His wife, Brenda Foster, is on the panel. She has been the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. We have Russell Liu. He's an attorney practicing with Shepard Mullen in Beijing for quite some time. Shackley Ruffetto, a circuit court judge from Maui, who after retiring went to China so he could teach judicial process there. And Nikki Shishido, who has worked for DBED, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism of the state of Hawaii, in Beijing for some time. All these people have had the experience of living on the ground in China. We want to have them tell their stories to you. So maybe this will encourage you to send your kid or CEO to China. So if you're interested in this program, which ought to be very interesting, come down on August 22nd. You can sign up at hvca.org. I'm Jay Fidell. Mahalo. We'll see you there.
Hi, we're back again. This is Charlie Willson for ThinkTech TV. I'm here with City Council member Carol Fukunaga and Representative Della Au Belatti, and we're discussing the Mauka area plan and the redevelopment of Kakaako. When we broke, we were talking about infrastructure capacity, and obviously, if you talk about adding the number of people, it can. Looking at the figures that were presented at in the environmental impact assessment, they basically said from the prior census, which was year 2000, because that was what was available when they wrote the EIS, they were talking about a 500% increase in population by 2030. That's a lot of people, that's a lot of cars, that's a lot of water use, that's a lot of sewer capacity. Now, primary on a lot of people's minds, because a lot of us drive through this area. Some of us drive at rush hour. So a big deal is getting through there. Now, for those of you who are interested, there was a study that was done as part of the Rapid Transit Project, and I have it here. Unfortunately, I can't show it to people at home right now, but we are at what they call level of service, LOS on the documents, level of service E and F, and it's like a grading system. E and F basically means you're going to sit there a long time waiting in traffic, and that affects much of the downtown Kakaako area on the main thoroughfares, such as Ala Moana Boulevard, King Street, Kapiolani in particular. Yes. What are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, I think the most immediate issue that people bring up are things that affect them daily, which is like water and sewer. But traffic is the thing that is the most pervasive issue. You know, it affects everyone, whether or not they actually live in Kakaako or not. And I would say that we really have to do a much better job of coming up with solutions. I think the difficulty in dealing with traffic in this whole area is that you've got sort of a whole region that is in a very densely populated, condo, high density type of neighborhood. You also have Ala Moana Shopping Center, you have Waikiki, you have, other major destinations that are immediately Mauka of the Kakaako area. So the question is not simply only a matter of getting around within the region, but how do you connect to other parts of urban Honolulu? And so I don't think we have all the answers yet, but I think that it is going to require a tremendous amount of coordination between state and county agencies, as well as a lot of review and evaluation by state and county legislative bodies. Because we're the ones, it's sort of like bus service. When bus service routes were changed, we definitely hear from our constituents to tell us what works and what doesn't work.
I think my comment on traffic would be that there's an elephant sitting in the room here, which is rail. And what I'm eagerly looking forward to is the EIS and the TOD overlay plan, because what's not clear to me is that a lot of this traffic that is coming through the Kakaako area, what we learned at the last town hall meeting, is that it's thoroughfare. It's people getting from one part of the community to the other and using the Kakaako area as a drive-through. That concerns the areas of urban Honolulu, because we run into that when we're just trying to get to our own neighborhoods. But one of the things that we need to look at is how is rail going to play into all of this, and will there be traffic alleviated going to the west side? Because you would presume that there would be. Again, it's something that we have to look forward to, I think, in the EIS and the TOD overlay plan when it comes out. We should see what are some of the answers to those kinds of questions.
I agree. I'm seeing a couple of different kinds of comments here. The comment regarding the rail system would be that we justify rail to a large extent on the ability to diversify our population, to build out in the second city area and bring people into downtown area, Waikiki jobs by the rail system. And so the question from those people is, if we're going to have a rail system, why do we need to put all the population downtown in the most populous area, the most populous portion of the state? The second point would be if we're adding this amount of population to the area, our traffic impacts are going to go up massively. I mean, we're already at level of service F on several of these intersections. Traffic does not move through there, and according to the rules established for providing a variance to allow these projects to go forward, this is, and I'm looking now at the 2011 plan, so-called, from the HCDA presentation. If there is an adverse impact, the variance would not be allowed. So that gives you a certain amount of leeway here. But there is no way this can be done without an adverse impact. And to quote here, from the 2009 Environmental Impact Statement, proposed mitigation, for those of you who want to look for this is on page ES6, which is part of the executive summary. They suggested they would only be adding 2 traffic signals at minor intersections, and they said, and I quote, "The level of adverse impacts will continue to remain significant and unavoidable at the Ward Halikuila and Ward Queen Street intersections. And these intersections are indicated as no feasible mitigation. In other words, there isn't the land available to put an extra lane in here. Therefore, according to the existing 2011 plan and rules, this would probably not be granted a variance. So something has got to be worked out here from the sound of it.
I think the real key is going to be taking a look at some of the traffic for the whole region, because as the individual projects are coming up, before the development authority, you really don't have quite that intense level of discussion of traffic impacts, because typically they're really reviewing individual parcels. Yes. And I think the issue you raise is really a very critical one. We have been asking the appropriate city departments, what their estimate is and what kinds of traffic analysis they've done. And by and large, the city agencies have been very supportive thus far. I think what we will now have to do is to ask them to take a look at the broader regional impacts and to see whether some of the impacts are going to be so negative that we need to do some things to change traffic flow in those areas. And so I think, that is just kind of a necessary next step. For example, when you think about, additional population in and around the Kakaako region, while they may have a lot of people who are going to work downtown, and going to entertainment, restaurants, and other alternatives in and around that area, that's great. But if they were going to Waikiki, for example, or if they were going to the University of Hawaii, then you really have to start thinking about what the traffic patterns and what the traffic flow for the whole region ought to be as it relates to other parts of Honolulu.
Yes, I agree.
Something I would add, Charlie, is that you're focusing on the 2011 rules and the no adverse impact. But I think one of the things that we have to, and the public has to get up to speed on, is that as these new TOD overlay plans, as the new TOD EIS comes about, and those rules get considered, these in fact may interact with the 2011 plan, such that variances like for the iconic buildings are built into TOD overlay. So it's critical that if you have concerns that you think that building above the accepted heights that the city uses is going to create a problem, it's incumbent, I think, upon residents to register that concern and say these iconic buildings may not be the best fit for the Kakaako development for X, Y, and Z reasons. But again, that really really means that people have to be involved and engaged in the process.
I hear it from other people who live downtown, basically, who are looking at the fact not just of traffic impacts once this is already built, but in the construction phase, you've got a lot of equipment that comes in and out.
Right.
You've got a lot of material that comes in and out. When you upgrade your water system, your sewer system, your electrical system, there's a lot of digging up of sidewalks and roads and traffic impacts along the way. So we'd be looking at probably the next 20 years, there would be significant traffic impacts as these upgrades are done, as these projects are put online. So it's not just the impact once the project is built, but it's the impact along the way additionally. So
I would also add that just the ongoing maintenance, and I'm sure Carol
Yes.
hears more of it,
Oh,
like
yes.
sewer breaks.
Repaving and-
Yes.
yes.
So I think the residents of Kakaako and urban Honolulu are very used to the fact that they have to allow for these kinds of ongoing projects.
Yeah, it's been going on for quite a while now. So yes, we're sort of used to it, but you never totally get used to it. Okay, how about other systems? Have you been brought up to date on water systems and water availability?
Actually, the city is going through, a broad review of both sewer as well as water capacity. The city's focus on meeting the consent decree requirements, however, are sort of, front and center for Department of Environmental Services. So I think we're going to really have to examine more closely whether or not the improvements that are being proposed are actually going to be done in time for some of the projects, as well as some of the current problems that are being identified by residents who live in Kakaako today. And for me, the most compelling one would really be the question of sewage, I guess, not so much capacity, but how the sewage lines do not really seem to be as efficient as we would like to have them be in moving sewage, from different parts of the island through Kakaako down to the pumping station, which is at the edge of Ala Moana, and then on to Sand Island. Because I was not aware of this before, but I just learned within the last few months that some of the buildings experience considerable odor problems. People who have walked through the area now report to me that, if you stand on this and such corner and the wind is blowing a particular way, the stench is really unbearable. And all of these are things that demonstrate that there may not be a perfect fit for meeting the consent decree requirements, as well as actually upgrading the sewers, to fix whatever is not quite up to speed today.
And we're talking about problems that exist under existing conditions without significant expansion yet. So that's a big deal. And the other issue I would add, my own concern is without water and sewer pumping, high rises become uninhabitable.
That's
Very
absolutely
quickly.
true, right?
And there's almost nothing you can do. If you lose power, you lose water pumping, you lose sewage pumping, and you're down. And it's not just a problem of getting up and down stairs on an elevator, it's a problem of not being able to flush your toilet, not being able to turn on your tap and get water. So we have to look at the way we may be designing brittle systems, and by brittle I mean they're more easily broken, they're less sustainable. And how do we ensure that we are going to have reliable capacity here for a long time into the future? So,
you know, this discussion for me raises, I think, another series of questions and inquiry that we as legislators, as area legislators, can kind of delve into. You know, for me, some of the questions that are still not answered is the upgrades that we've done as the state sufficient inside Kakaako, but then what is the capacity outside of Kakaako as it flows through? Does the city have to do maybe more pumping stations within Kakaako? What are the opportunities for that? Are there opportunities, places for us to create those kinds of facilities? Who pays for it? Is it the city or the state? So I think all of these questions are things that we as legislators can continue to prod at and hopefully get better answers, so that in the planning process, in the appropriation process, whether it's city or state, we know exactly the types of infrastructure that we need and what we're gonna, the bill at the end of the day that we might be looking at.
I agree, and also we have to consider whether or not the developer will be paying a portion of this as well, and from my perspective, more importantly, what is the failure mode of all of these systems that we implement just in case. And with that, we're going to have to take another short break here, and we'll be back to you in just a moment.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell. This is our ThinkTech News. Samsung introduced us to the ATIV Book 9 Plus Ultrabook back in June, but now the company has provided more details about its rollout and has also announced the new ATIV Tab 3 Windows 8 tablet. The ATIV Book 9 Plus laptop is a Windows 8 answer to the MacBook Pro, complete with a super high-res Gorilla Glass screen. The display packs 3200 by 1800 resolution into its 13.3 inches, which beats the Retina's 2500 by 1600 display. It's also thinner and lighter than the Apple Notebook. It will cost $100 less than the cheapest Retina display MacBook Pro, $1399, when it becomes available for pre-order on August 18th, that's this Friday. The 10.1-inch ATIV Tab 3 is being touted as the world's thinnest Windows 8 tablet at just 0.31 inches thick and 1.28 pounds, thinner and lighter than the newest iPad. It has an Intel Atom 22760 processor and comes with 2 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of solid-state storage. It includes a digital stylus, a cover with a built-in Bluetooth keyboard, a kickstand, and Microsoft Office. It will go on sale on September 1st for $699. This is Jay Fidell. That's our ThinkTech News. Aloha.
We're back again with Councilmember Carol Fukunaga and Representative Della Au Belatti, and we're discussing the Mauka area plan, redevelopment of Kakaako, and when we started on our break, we were talking about what happens if, what happens when the rubber band breaks and all of a sudden perhaps you don't have power or water or sewer, and we have all these interconnected systems here. And as we look at the possibility of taking this area, which basically talks about redeveloping the entire area between downtown and Ala Moana Center, and perhaps increasing the population by up to 500. Well, increasing it by 400%, going to 500% of the 2000 census by 2030. This imposes greater demands on all of our systems, and we just talked about sewer a little bit, and a little bit about water, and about traffic systems. And during the break, we were talking about, well, what happens if we lose power? You live in a high-rise, you've got no water, you can't flush your toilets, okay? You've got no sewer pumping to handle the sewage on the other end. So the long-term concern is, are we building more brittle systems that are more prone to breakdown? And if we put on our sustainability hat for a moment, because we're all looking at the fact we live on an island, okay? And our power comes from oil. Unlike every other state in the nation, most of our power is, I think it's about 85% thereabouts, is oil-fired. and that gets more expensive and it's more prone to disruption. So have there been any discussions that you've been involved with that looks at the failure mode here, that looks at whether or not we are secure?
Well, that's a great question because when you think about it, the city is really the frontline mechanism to deal with emergencies and disasters. And fortunately, Oahu has never been hit by a major hurricane or tsunami, and because of that, and because of our recent experiences, where Maui experienced some power outages and other kind of damage, we know that Honolulu has to be even more well prepared because our time is next. I mean, you almost have to think like that, and we really have to take advantage of, whatever modern technology we can utilize to do that. And my committee tomorrow is having a briefing on climate change that the University of Hawaii Sea Grant program is putting on. They are in the process of updating Hawaii's climate change sea rise maps. And Chip Fletcher, who is kind of a well-respected scientist who has documented, some of the changes in sea rise in and around urban Honolulu and the rest of Hawaii, has quite a few recommendations for the state and the county to safeguard both buildings as well as roadways and our infrastructure.
And that's a really important point because the calculations that have been done so far in sea level rise have missed an awful lot of information, and part of it is that as the glaciers and polar ice caps melt off, the sea level rise is not equal. You would think that it would be equal around the globe, but it isn't.
Right.
And it's concentrated more in the equatorial areas and Oceania, where Hawaii is. So we will experience much more sea level rise than they would at northern and southern latitudes. Also, when we look at the area where we're building this project, the area all the way from Ala Moana Beach Park up to McKinley High School and a portion of the McKinley High School grounds is all within the 100-year floodplain.
Right.
So we're talking about land that's at about 5 feet mean sea level average, which means that as you get up toward King Street, you're probably a little above 5 feet and a little below 5 feet when you're down on the Ala Moana Boulevard side. So there's an opportunity, a serious opportunity, not just for flooding, but for storm surge. And if there were to be a tsunami, this would be a potential inundation area. And so those maps have to be updated. The other thing is, as you melt off polar ice caps, you change the weight balance on the Earth's mantle. And therefore you get a situation where you're much more likely to have earthquakes in the future. So that increases your tsunami risk. So we have a lot of things going on, and we're outside the envelope of our available knowledge, available data on that.
I think the good thing, though, is that the state and county have been partnering, pretty aggressively with national entities. Last year, when you had Hurricane Sandy, wreaked havoc across part of the eastern seaboard, a number of Hawaii trainers and participants, flew to the area, and a lot of the educational information that they have actually brought back is what will help us build a lot more resilient structures, prevent, potential danger by learning from these sort of catastrophic disaster types of scenarios and looking to see how we can be better prepared in, safeguarding our own commercial as well as residential kinds of communities.
Excellent point.
I was going to just add, fortunately or unfortunately, we have all of these experiences of catastrophic events in other communities. So we can learn a lot from other places.
Exactly. And in my mind, what I think when I look at some of these maps here and I see 5 feet mean sea level is how do we make sure that sometime in the future, not necessarily in our lifetimes, but within the life of the project, because once we build up an area, it's going to be like that for the next 100, 200, probably longer than that, probably centuries in the future. How do we design an area that is not prone to a Katrina type event, as we get changing weather patterns, because we see feed forwards on the global warming and the melting of polar ice caps and the release of methane hydrates, which we won't get into this show. I think it's a bit too complex. One other thing, this whole area is built on basically what was an alluvial plain. There's a lot of sedimentation in the area. There's a lot of fill material. In general, we're talking about an area where, and again, anybody at home who wants to look this stuff up, you can go to the environmental impact statement that was written in 2009, which you can download yourself from the Office of Environmental Quality Control. But the environmental assessment basically provides maps here, and it shows you exactly what the subsurface elevations are, where you get to hard ground, the stable ground. So if you're going down to the coral substrate, the solid area you can drive piles into and such, you find that in the area where the major portion of the development is pushed up toward Ala Moana Boulevard, that's where you have the deepest fill material. And some of this area you go through about 20 feet of basically old sediment and fill material before you get to good solid ground here. So it introduces an issue of how is this going to hold up under earthquake conditions? You know, what happens if? You know, and it's the what ifs that sometimes are a big deal, especially when you start proposing very tall buildings, and
Right.
then you're asking for a variance to do that. The other thing, and also in the environmental impact statement, for those of you who want to get further up to speed, is the subsurface conditions were also indicated as being poor for the majority of this area that we're talking about building on. So these are some of the big issues. I don't know if you want to talk to these issues now or wait till they've covered these in a little bit more depth.
Well, I'm not an engineer, so I look at these plans and I have faith in the developers that they're building buildings that will stand up to time. But clearly these are questions. And when you start talking about the intensity of development that we're having, these are all very good questions, you know, and I'm sure the developers, I hope to God the developers are analyzing these issues.
Remember though, the developer looks at their individual project, and it's up to the city and the county to look at the big picture here.
That's
the
true.
big picture being how do we handle emergency services? The developer is going to say, okay, I'm putting up a development and I'm looking at the access and egress, the number of parking spaces and the landscaping and these issues, you know, but I'm not handling emergency management by and large. And if we have a problem, if there's a disaster, it's the county services that are going to have to move emergency vehicles through there. If you get an area which is totally tied up with traffic jams and you try to get through there with a fire truck or with an ambulance or whatever, any kind of a emergency access, and you end up with a traffic jam, or if you have a tsunami warning and a bunch of people are trying to get home from Ala Moana Center or Waikiki and they're transiting through the area, and you get a big traffic jam. This is an issue that I don't really know if they're looking at very carefully at this point, but it would be a concern.
Well, and clearly the city is, really the front line of defense on this. So I am heartened. There are a number of different conferences that were held recently. Last year, the City Council took the lead in organizing an emergency preparedness gathering. And there were at least 2 coastal communities on Oahu. I think one was Kailua, the other was Ewa Beach, which had responded, to the tsunami and disaster preparedness type of experience by organizing themselves so that they were better prepared to be able to withstand, any kind of disaster that could occur. And I think the message from, both the city and the state agencies is that all communities really need to start thinking about how best to withstand different kinds of natural disasters that could occur at almost any time. And given climate change, I think that's a good message for us to pay attention to, because we never know when the next big disaster may hit.
That's excellent advice. Excellent advice.
I would add to that, I think, this question about long-term planning, something that's coming out of all these town hall meetings that we're having is that what are the other kinds of infrastructure do we need? So schools become important.
Yes.
Healthcare facilities, we're talking about 30,000 more people in Kakaako area. Do we have the healthcare facilities to also handle all those needs that are going to be cropping up? Certainly there's a lot of work for us to do.
Absolutely. And when we start talking about tsunami planning, if we've got schools in there, we need to think about them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the emergency vehicle access and school bus access, and hopefully some of this will be walkable, so a lot of kids can be walking to school instead. We're going to take another break, and we'll be back again in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard of Kumu Kahua Theater, and when I was young I used to love watching Charlie Chan movies on Family Classic TV on Sunday afternoons. Our show at Kumu Kahua that runs from August 22nd through September 22nd is called Will the Real Charlie Chan Please Stand Up? It's written by Nancy P. Moss. It takes place right here in Chinatown. I really hope you'll come in and watch it. You will love it. It's everything about the movies that you loved and more. Go to kumukahua.org to get more information and your tickets. We'll see you there.
I'm David Day, the host of Asian Review. This is a ThinkTech program in which we take the issues of the Asia-Pacific region, whether they be in business, in foreign policy, in national security, or geopolitics. And we take those issues and we try to probe down in some real depth. Maybe it's not always politically correct, but we get to the truth. We do things that the regular media can't do. And the reason that we can do those things is because we here at ThinkTech have the contacts, we have the network, and we can take the time and explore the issues in depth. Tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. here at ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm David Day.
Hi, we're back again. This is Charlie Willson. We're talking about Hawaii's future with City Council member Carol Fukunaga and State Representative Della Au Belatti. And we've been having a great discussion here on the future of Kakaako and the Mauka area plan and the various proposals for development of the area or redevelopment of the area, and a number of documents that have been released. We've discussed the environmental impact statement that was written in 2009, and you have in front of you the
Yes.
the transit-oriented development, TOD overlay plan. We'll just hold that up for anybody who wants to know about this. This one is dated May 20th, 2013. It's available from the HCDA website. That's Hawaii Community Development Authority. And so a lot of this documentation is there for anybody to get access to. So if you want to get further informed, if you live in the area, if you pass through the area, you want to know more, you can get this information. It's not always friendly. The environmental impact statement is in 3 parts that are like 600 pages, but a lot of this is in the executive summaries. Now, we have a situation where we've been talking about a population increase here. The 2000 census said we had, in the Kakaako area, 6,180 residents, and we could go up to potentially over 30,000 residents by the year 2030. Housing units are expected to increase, according to the environmental impact statement, from 42,000 in 2000 to 20,600 plus by 2030. And I'm sure you've got some residents who are calling you and expressing concerns. How would you like these people to get involved if they have opinions to share?
I think the first thing they should do is, to let us know what their concerns are, because oftentimes the area legislators can play a role in helping to get their questions answered. We had a community meeting in July where we had a lot of people turn out, and there were so many questions we could not have all of them answered at that one meeting. But the good thing was that by getting a lot of these questions on paper and in writing, we can begin to see where the areas of greatest concern were. And so I think infrastructure was a big question area. Affordability of the different housing alternatives is another big question. So I think it's important to get the concerns on the table up front, because if we can help address those concerns, then I think everyone will be well served.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are at such a crossroads. Everything that we've talked about means and calls out for public attention. I think there's groups like this Kakaako Do It Right group.
I love that poster, by the way.
I really think that citizens have to engage. Good ways to engage with us.
Mm-hmm.
Another good way is through the environmental impact statement process and the comment periods that are out there. I think it's important not to get discouraged by the many meetings that we have, but maybe to really focus on the large EISs that are going to require, I think if the public can come out with a strong voice of their concerns, then their concerns will be addressed. it's important that we stay engaged because this is about the future of our home.
I like that.
I think the other thing that we would want to emphasize is for people who now live in Kakaako, if there are specific problems that they want to see addressed, then we would want them to bring those up, immediately, because whether it's sewage problems, whether it's transportation issues, these are things that, we would want to see corrected and definitely addressed before the time that, additional development comes into the area.
That was the disconnect that I noticed at the last town hall meeting, in that HCDA talked mostly about the affordability index, and they wanted to produce a chart and say this will be affordable to this range of people here. And we had a huge audience, a lot of them downtown Kakaako area residents, and they're all saying, yeah, but you're going to jam up my streets here so I can't get in and out, and what's going to happen if you're doing another sewer upgrade, water upgrade, whatever, am I going to be able to get into and out of my home? So that's a little bit of a disconnect I see ongoing right now. Again, we have a lot of information that is available to people, so they are able to comment. Do you know when the transit-oriented development overlay plan is going to go final, when that's comment period is?
I believe that they are going to release the draft EIS that will include the TOD overlay plan in October 2013. So there will be a 45-day official comment period. The HCDA has actually released the TOD overlay plan ahead of the EIS, but the more and they've been taking comment, but when the formal draft EIS comes out, that will be the time for official public comment.
Yeah, I apologize. I said final. I meant the final version of the draft, because the draft is published in a way that the public can review it and comment on it, and it's the final publication of the draft that starts the clock on the 45-day comment period.
Right.
And so people who want to get involved and want to comment on that, keep an eye out around October for the draft to be available. Now, any closing comments that you'd like to make to your constituents here, people who are interested in any of this, and people who are watching at home? This will be available on YouTube if you're watching it streaming now, or if you're watching it on OC16 or on Olelo. You can get this through the ThinkTech Hawaii website. So if you go to www.thinktechhawaii.com, and you pull down our menu, you can find not just live streaming, as some of you are watching right now, but you can find the YouTube versions of all of our shows. So anybody who's seen this and said, oh, that went by too fast, you can pull it up again and pull down that information the second time around.
Charlie, I'd just like to close with a thank you to ThinkTech Hawaii and to your viewers out there, because I think you provide a great service, and this is a great way to stay involved and be educated about the issues of the day.
I would have to echo that, because for so many of the residents who may not be able to come to community meetings, being able to watch something either on YouTube or on television makes a big difference. So thank you.
It's very, very valuable to us, and I want to thank you both so much for coming in, because it's difficult in the course of a town meeting where somebody basically is going to give up and give you a presentation, but a lot of times you're saying, whoa, wait, I have a question. And we saw a lot of people filling out the little comment cards here to ask questions, and not many of those got through here. So what we're doing in these shows is trying to provide a few everyman sort of comments here and questions, and say, what happens if, and the ability to get those answers, because you have much more detailed information than we do, and this is extremely valuable to us as the public. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And again, I'm going to repeat for those of you who may have not caught the entire show. The show is available at www.thinktechhawaii.com, and if you take a moment here and pull down the menus here. You'll find not just the live stream availability of the shows, you'll find the show times, and you'll find the YouTube version. So you can play this back, or you can send the link to your friends if you have other people who live in the neighborhood who are questioning this, who have questions about this and they want to get access to this. You can send them the link. They can watch this at their leisure. So I thank you again very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, broadcasting live from the Pioneer Plaza in downtown Honolulu. We raise public awareness about tech, energy, and globalism in Hawaii. Technology is critical to our state. A vibrant tech sector will give us new prospects in the global marketplace and will offer great careers and make our economy more resilient. Streaming live on Ustream and Spreaker, ThinkTech allows its hosts and guests invaluable opportunities to report important events and discuss important questions, and to be heard here in Hawaii and around the world. You can find links to our live streams on thinktechhawaii.com or on our mobile website, m.thinktechhawaii.com. And you can see our archive on YouTube. It's all just a click away. We want to do whatever we can to keep Hawaii relevant, connected, and thriving in the complexity of the 21st century. We hope you will help us in those efforts. Tune in today. This is ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. Mahalo.